Доброго дня, шановні гості.
Hello, dear guests of the Cinema Festival of Linoleum. I'm happy to welcome you at our masterclass, the case of two animation movies, Loving Vincent and The Peasants. And I'm happy to introduce our today's speakers. Our guest who is joining us online is Mr. Sean Bobbitt.
Hello, hello.
Sean є.
Sean is the producer of those two films. To the right of me, we have Olga Zhurzenko, the producer of the Ukrainian company Ukrkino, who is an experienced producer and who has in her experience several full-length films and short films and even TV series in her filmography, and also she's a co-producer in the project of The Peasants. Hello. Yep. And Tatiana and Katerina Ocheredko, who are the animators and artists from Ukraine who are working on the project Loving Vincent and who are also the artists and animators at the project of The Peasants. Hello. Good evening. And to introduce you into the context, we will tell a bit about the project of Loving Vincent. Has anybody of the audience seen this film? Would you raise your hand? Okay, wonderful. For those who haven't seen Loving Vincent, let us remind ourselves about this project. Or to see what that is, let us watch a short teaser to this film. So please, Loving Vincent, the teaser.
Вінсент Ван Гог наклав на себе руки? Як можна від абсолютного спокою дійти до самогубства за 6 тижнів?
Що привело вас до Овера?
Я хочу дещо зробити для Вінсента.
Ви ж не будете знову здіймати тут гамір? У цьому домі вже виплакано забагато сліз за цим божевільним.
Його сусіди і поліція. Та усе місто проти хворого чоловіка. Вінсенте, що ви накоїли?
Ми всі знали, щось було не так.
Вінсенте!
Якби ж я тільки міг бути одним із них.
Видатні митці, це неприкаяні душі. Ось ціна твоєї правди. Чи воно того варте? Він передумав? Зрештою, захотів жити?
Ви так хочете дізнатися про його смерть? Та що ви знаєте про його життя?
Своєю роботою я хотів би показати, що криється в серці такого нікчеми, як я.
You're loving Vincent.
Thank you. So this movie has been shown in 2018 in the shortlist for the Best Animation Movie for the American Cinema Academy of Oscar Award. And the first question is to you, Sean. Would you please tell how did the idea to create this movie emerge? Because this is an original project. Who has invented it, and how easy it was for you to find the partners and to persuade them that this project will be successful?
So how easy was it for me to find partners, I understood?
Yes, exactly.
And what was the first question?
Yes, first question, how was developed the original idea? Whose idea it was? And how do you find partners? Is it easy or not to say them that the project will be successful?
Well, the original idea was Dorota Kobiela's. She was working actually with BreakThru on a short film, and Hugh, my business partner, fell in love with her and asked her what she was planning on doing next, and she told us about this short film that she wanted to do about Vincent van Gogh. And Hugh, he's a history buff, he loves history, so he immediately started reading everything about Vincent van Gogh, and basically decided that, we need to do this as a feature film. Do I need to wait for translation?
No, we have simultaneously.
Okay. Yeah, so Dorota was a little bit dubious at first. She thought, there's no way we can do this as a feature film. She was planning on doing the entire film by herself, animating the entire film herself. And it was supposed to be, like a 10 or 15-minute film or something like that. And Hugh said, well, we just have to figure out a way to do it. What we'll do is we'll hire painters, and there are a lot of good painters in our region. They're very classically trained. And, with these painters in hand, we'll teach them, about animation. So that was sort of like the origins of the project. As far as partners, no, it wasn't easy. Everyone said they thought, oh, wow, this is a beautiful concept. It's incredibly beautiful, but who's going to go see it? Nobody really cares about art. Art in the film world, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And I think that was the biggest problem, is that we didn't have anything to compare it to. And I think, the good thing about the fact that we were able to make the film is that, now other people who are doing animation for adults can use us as that benchmark. I mean, when we were doing Loving Vincent, we always said, well, it'll be like Persepolis, Waltz with Bashir. But, it's not the same. This is a painting animation. Those are films about social and political issues. So it was very difficult to convince people that, we could have the same success, or actually we ended up having more success than Loving Vincent. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we hear very clearly.
Good. I just want to make sure. And actually, we had a talk last week, Hugh and I, with one of the biggest French sales agents, and they said, "Well, we really thank you for making this film, because now everybody who has an animation for adults says, yeah, but look what Loving Vincent did."
Okay, thank you, Sean. And далі я...
So now I would like to ask our artists, our guests, Tatiana and Katerina, as they used to be the Ukrainians working at this project. Were you the only ones from Ukraine who were working on the project Loving Vincent, or there were more? No, there were 12 of us who drew 15 minutes of the movie during 10 months, and it's really a lot. So this is how we got to the project, using this opportunity of the open call for the Ukrainian painters and artists. We are the first ethnical group of the foreigners who came to Poland for the open call. So was it a competition for the artists from all over the world, or just territory by territory? First Ukraine, then some other countries. First it was just for Ukraine. Then when they presented a little excerpt of the film in France at the Festival of Short Films and Animation Films, there was a huge resonance, and people began to get acquainted and interested in that. The animators created one more open call for the artists from all over the world. So how many people and animators were working on this project? Well, if I remember properly, there were 125 paint artists in the end. This is the last team. And everything began with 20 animators from Poland. This was the biggest team from Poland, then Ukraine, and then the whole world. Would you please tell how this competition was taking place? Because, as we have communicated before, you didn't have any experience in animation, but you had an experience in painting, right? Yes. And how did this competition take place? How did you do that? Were there any obstacles if you didn't have any experience in animation? Just to move on in this selection. Well, the most important thing, you should know how to paint academically, and you should feel the color, because we selected the team for the colorful episodes in the film. So we provided several conditions. First, you should send the portfolio of your paintings, and then you should create a work to take a portrait, just any portrait made by Van Gogh, and to create a copy, but to embed the portrait of a living person, and then to make a picture to compare it. So whether you can adapt the portrait to the style of Van Gogh and still for it to be totally recognizable, to have the proper pattern. Because whatever the animator is doing, everything should be reflected with the main features and traits. The voice and the actors added to that, and depending on the style of painting, we could see the whole movie. So one of the most important conditions was just the skill of painting, to paint proportionally, to feel that this is the professional, the expert painter, and that the character drawn is the real character. And then in the selection, the painter said who was selected, and then we had a 3-day test in Wrocław, right? In Wrocław, yes, in Wrocław. Then we went there and animated. We had a part, and then we wanted to create a certain number of animated excerpts and several frames and shots, and for some time. You should get to know how to animate quickly, to create a copy of Van Gogh's work, and all of that in 3 days. After that, the end outcome was selected. Then you go to Poland, to the studio, and for the 3 weeks you are taught to have the proper animation process. Well, the thing is that Ukraine provides a very nice academic education, which helped to implement this project and for the whole group to get to know how to animate very quickly. What did you graduate from? We graduated from Kyiv Polytechnic University, the Department of Book Graphics. We are not the best, because according to our education we are illustrators, but by vocation we are painters and artists. Having monumentalist works in the portfolio, we created mosaics in the temple in Kiev. We are the painters, we dealt with animation, we are dealing with graphics, so we are universal soldiers, but thanks to the nice academic education in Ukraine. And it concerns the academy and other higher educational institutions. Was the competition high for Loving Vincent among the Ukrainians? How many people were selected? 12, right? Yes, 12 people were selected, the ones whose surnames are in the credits. They are the basics. But the competition was among 5,000 artists. No, from all over the world. But from Ukraine, I don't know how many from them were from Ukraine, but we were one of the biggest groups, which almost fully came for tuition for the training and who got to the studio. So approximately 4 of the people were not selected. So would you please tell, in this type of animation, how many frames per second are used? What's the speed? If a usual animation has 24 FPS, then the animation Van Gogh style, handmade one, has 12 FPS, 12 frames per second, 720 frames per minute, and in the movie it's approximately 64,000 frames. So this is a titanic work. The Peasants have the same. Yes, the Peasants have the same. The project of the Peasants has the same. So, do I understand correctly that 1 frame in 1 second contains 12 original paintings drawn manually? Yes. And in average, per 1 frame, depending on the level of the sophistication, you have the time allocated. So during the day, we had to create 3 or 4 frames. Sean? I would like to clarify and to ask you whether this project, this process of the selection of painters was difficult for you, if they didn't have any experience in animation. How this challenge was really was rather interesting, and for you to find such skillful animators that you even had the competition among the painters from all over the world.
I didn't understand
Okay,
how difficult
I'll say in English.
was to recruit the painters?
How is difficult was the process of selection of painters for this work? Because as girls said, that it were more than 5,000 competitors for this job, and only more than 100 people was selected for final work. So how challengeable this was for you?
It was, yeah, I mean, it wasn't actually easy, despite the fact that, you know, at the beginning, because nobody really knew about the project. You put an ad at the art schools saying, we're looking for painters to work on a film, to be animators. And then some people say, well, I'm not an animator. And so they don't apply. And so at the very beginning, I think it was difficult. You know, we had quite a few people who applied. You know, we had, you know, probably 300, 450, something like that, painters who applied from Poland at the beginning. And I think we were only able to get from that group of painters from Poland, I think we only got about 35 or something like that. Which is why we decided to look, you know, I discussed with you, I said, well, if we want to finish the film, you know, we need more painters. You know, where should we look for more painters? You know, does Ukraine have a similar, you know, education in painting? Because the benefit of the fine arts education in most of this region of Europe was that it was sort of, you know, classical training. You were taught how to paint. I mean, it wasn't just about your own ideas at the beginning. It was just, how do you physically put the paint on the canvas, which is very important for us, because our painters have to be very technically skilled to be able to do the animation so that it looks realistic, to be able to keep, you know, the line conformed as they're moving it across the canvas. So we needed people who were very skilled painters. And that's when we started thinking about Ukraine. And there's a person in Gdansk who actually is an artist as well. And he said he would help us. And he basically got in touch with the fine arts academies. And we had quite a few applications from Ukraine. I can't remember exactly how many. I think it was about 150, something like that. And I think we chose about 15 painters, and almost everybody ended up working on the film. I mean, the painters that came to Poland, took the test, went through the training. I mean, basically, there was maybe a couple of painters who didn't join the film afterwards. So we're really happy with the cooperation we had with Ukraine on the film. So.
Okay, thank you, Sean. And the next question will be regarding new project, the Peanuts. And I want to ask you why was selected the idea of equalization Polish novel? Because first work was based on works of a painter, famous painter with a world-known name, and your new work has very maybe not so popular background as name of Vincent van Gogh, because it's only Polish novel. So I want to ask you about this maybe risk, or why you believe in this idea, as may I say such.
Yeah, I mean, you know, first with Loving Vincent, the script was actually one of the hardest things about the film. I mean, the painting was obviously difficult as well, but the work on the script took a long, long time, because when you're trying to do a film about a painter using his paintings, you have to write the script into his paintings. So you have to, if there's a painting you want to show in the film, you have to have a scene that fits in there, but it also has to fit into a story that makes sense. So the script was very difficult. I mean, we had probably 20 versions of the script. I mean, really radically different versions of the script. You know, before we finally found, you know, this murder mystery that we really liked, and then went forward with that. when we were doing Loving Vincent, we had no idea what the reception was going to be. I mean, I was probably the most optimistic person in the entire company in terms of, the appeal of this film to international audiences. Everybody else was saying, no, maybe, I mean, the top art house distributor in Poland said, I mean, how many admissions can you do? Like 20,000, 50,000? We did 500,000 in Poland. So, I mean, it's just nobody really knew how to, and we didn't know. So we didn't know if we were going to do this one film in painting animation, and that was the end. But when the film went on to make, almost $50 million at the box office, then we knew that, there was an audience for this type of film. And so we started thinking, well, we had an idea to do a horror film based on Goya's paintings. We had some other ideas we were thinking about, but what we didn't want to do was get locked into this sort of, rut that BreakThru does films about famous painters in the painter style. We wanted to do something that just shows the versatility of painting animation, and we wanted to do something that was already a really strong story, and that we weren't confined to the paintings to tell the story. We wanted to have a little bit more freedom. We wanted it to be a feminine story. Dorota, she spent 10 years with Vincent van Gogh, basically at the center of her life. She wanted to do something about women, about strong women. And I think, The Peasants is a story about strong women. It is a Nobel Prize winning novel. It's one that's not very well known, but it won a Nobel Prize for a reason. I mean, it's a beautiful piece of work. It's an incredibly compelling story. It's a very, it's a very timely story for now. Just, the story of the person who's different, being shunned by her society, being thrown out of her society, being blamed for all the ills of society. And, we see this happening today. So we thought that it's something that still resonates today, the lesson of the novel or the story of the novel. So, I mean, there was a lot of reasons. And we think, for us, I think we wanted to do a film that had a really strong story and build the painting around it and find a style of painting that fits the story that we want to tell, rather than find a painting style we like and find a story to go with it. So that was sort of like the main driver.
Okay, thank you, Sean. And the next question is, what is structure of co-production in this project, and what is the place of Ukraine in it? And also this question will be to Ola, because Ola is co-producer from Ukraine. So we'll start from you, Sean, and then Ola will continue.
Well, I mean, quite honestly, from the very beginning of the production, just because we had such a strong group of Ukrainian painters, I mean, it's easier to bring somebody to Poland for like 6 months. But when you're telling them that you want them to come for like over a year, then it's a little bit difficult. Some of the painters that worked on Loving Vincent from Ukraine, they have families now, they have small children. And so it's a lot more difficult to bring them over to Poland to have them work on the project. So we thought it just made sense to have Ukraine as a co-production partner. And so we're working with Olga actually on trying to, get funding for that so she can become a co-production partner. One of the other things that we found challenging for us, because it's not our specialty, was VFX. And so we started thinking about countries that have a good VFX sector. And we decided on Serbia. We had a friend who basically recommended a VFX company there as somebody who could work with us. We could work with doing the VFX. Plus we had 3 painters from Serbia who worked on the project. So we thought, well, we can do VFX in Serbia and do, a portion of the painting animation. We thought we'd only end up with 5 painters in Serbia, and we actually have 14. And there's actually some painters who are qualified to work on the project, but the studio is too small. So we just want to have the painting stations for them. And then the third partner, because with Loving Vincent, the whole philosophy of the film was everything is on a single canvas. With Peasants, we're not as particular about that. We're more interested in the story aspect of the film. And so we're looking at, various creative ways to try to figure out how can we do this more efficiently using more traditional animation techniques. So for example, one of the things we did at the beginning, we wanted to make it a very cinematic film, like using traditional camera moves and things like that. With Loving Vincent, it was a lot of static camera. With the Peasants, we have a lot more moving camera. But what we're doing is we're painting on layers. So the background we paint separately, the character we paint separately, which helps to speed up the animation time. And we had thought about doing some digital painting using some digital solutions as well, which is our co-producer in Lithuania has more experience in the digital sphere. So we thought we'd bring them on as a co-producer as well.
Thank you, Sean. And Оля, мы знаем.
We know that those who follow that yesterday there was the presentation of the projects of Ukraine State Film Agency. The project was supported rather well, and also good marks out of the first round. Second round was yesterday, and the presentation was rather outstanding, and in my opinion, it was convincing. Then there was also good feedback from experts, but still, as far as I know, this is not the first attempt to get support from Ukrainian state, and I would like to talk to you about what were the challenges or maybe the successes in supporting this project from Ukrainian co-producer. Yeah, well, actually we're working together with Sean on this project since 2019, and when we wanted to do co-production only Poland, Ukraine, and then we tried a bit more to get some financing, all that, different nuances with that. But also until the very last, we're going to try and make this film as Ukrainian, both Ukrainian and Polish, because we believe that our talent base, for the sake of which Sean, Q, and BreakThru actually came to Ukraine and came to us, that's the most important that there is, and this is what for we are supposed to actually get this financing. And this is the main reason why we believe that this film should be just as Ukrainian, as Polish, as Serbian, and as Lithuanian.
Has to be called a Polish and the Ukrainian film as well as Serbian and Lithuanian because of the talent base.
So I'm coming back to Ukrainian because that contribution that is going to be made by Ukrainian artists and animators into that film is going to be very significant, I believe. And also we planned lots of interesting things. When Hugh came to us last year, we got stuck in a taxi in Kiev traffic jams, and we came up with an interesting thing. Well, there's a very well-known Polish band, Laboratoria Piesni. They are going to sing for Ukrainian dubbing, sing our songs, our folk songs in Ukrainian, and it's going to be a very good cultural synthesis and fusion, and we believe that this is going to be successful. And in this soundtrack that we are going to work out like that. And we are also trying to concentrate as much as we can, to prove as much as we can that Ukraine, at least yesterday, the commission, I tried to prove to the commission that this film is based on realism style. In Ukraine, there were very talented Ukrainian artists who followed realism in their art. And at that time, it was in the beginning of the 20th century. Lots of Ukrainians went to St. Petersburg to learn drawing and painting. But as Ukraine and Poland of the time, they were together as part of the Russian Empire, Ukrainians had a choice. They could go to St. Petersburg. Repin chose this way, let's say. But there were also others who chose to study painting in Poland, let's say, and then later they came back to Ukraine, and they also produced very powerful painting in the style of realism, on Ukrainian motifs, about peasants as well. Sergei Vasilkivsky, for example. Opanas, somebody, I forgot the last name. There were lots of artists that we can be proud of, who worked in realism style, and the Peasants are going to be in the same style. If we take the story of the film, what do you think? Is this story more universal for the whole world, or is it local for Poland, or maybe for Poland to Ukraine? What is your opinion about that, about the story? I agree with Sean and Hugh that this story is universal for the whole world, that it is going to be clear in any country. And I'm very convinced in its global success. The fact that it is built on Polish material is only going to help us, because we had very similar ways of life, and it's very easy to make a mistake when you look at the paintings, the key frames. Some of them have already been painted, and it's actually easy to make a mistake when you actually show these key frames to the person and you ask, is it Poland or is it Ukraine? Yes, and it is very easy to be mistaken. So, by the way, I planned that we're going to show it a bit earlier, and now I guess it would be very good to look at the teaser of that new film that we're now talking about, The Peasants. And I hope that you'll notice that the household elements and interiors and exterior, they're all very similar. As Ola was saying, at that time we lived in one country. These are the events of 1900.
Маємо право вимагати те, що нам належить.
We have the right to demand what belongs to us.
Як ті воли працюємо день і ніч, як наймите, тепер що? На неї все запишеш? На цю хвойду? Що вона стерво, шльондра, усе село це знає. Увесь світ навіть. А спав з нею хто хотів.
Thank you. Ola, do you have anything more to add?
Can be here only half an hour, am I right? So
Yeah.
now I will ask you a few questions. Maybe they should be in the end of our conversation, but I'll ask them now because I know that you will go. І також хочу звернутися до аудиторії, якщо у вас є.
And I would also like to ask the audience, if you have questions to Sean, you can now ask them. The volunteer is going to come up to you with the mic, because Sean can only stay with us until 8:30 and we're at 9 p.m.
About new projects, do you have any new ideas in development, and in how many new films do you believe that can be made in this technique? It will be the last project, or you believe that it may be new technologies that will live hundreds of years?
No, I mean, I think, what we wanted to show, first with Peasants and also with the future projects is sort of like the versatility of painting animation, how you can use this unique style that, people have fallen in love with to tell different types of stories. So, for example, we are actually working on the project after the Peasants, which will be called Winterreise. It's some friends of ours from the UK who had the idea at the beginning. Originally, we were just going to do the animation. Now they've asked us to come in and be the majority co-producer. So we'll actually do the live action shoot with the actors in Poland. and also do the animation. The VFX will be done in Belgium. Some of the actors are from other countries. We have a German actress and or a German actor and a French actress. John Malkovich is in the project. And it's a very musical film. It's a film to the song cycle of Schubert called Winterreise. And it's a song about a poet who's in love with the girl from the local village. He's an outsider. She has to reject his love for, her mother convinces her because her father died, she should marry somebody wealthy and not a poet who's poor. And then he, basically after being rejected, he leaves the town and he goes through a journey through the winter, storms and mountains and everything, trying to come to peace with this decision that she's made. And that's the next project we have. The interesting thing about it is that we are planning to do it not in oil paints. We're actually planning to computer paint this project. It's a much, Peasants is a realistic style, but it's still realistic oil painting. This will be a much more realistic style, and it's more kind of like a computer effect a little bit that we're putting on. We want to make it look painterly, but we want it to be very recognizable. There's no dialogue in the film, or very little dialogue. So basically the entire story of the film has to be shown on the faces and expressions of the actors. So we have to be able to see them very clearly. So that's the next film we're working on. We have another film after that that we have already gotten development funding for, and we are finishing the script hopefully by the end of the year. It's called The Blaze, and it's a film that takes place 140,000 years ago. My partner Hugh is actually writing it, and he is a huge history, paleontology, all of that. He loves it. And it's basically about the origins of where we came from and how we came to dominate the earth, essentially. And a lot of that has to do with art as well. It's about a time in history, and a lot of people don't know about this, but we as Homo sapiens, as humans, almost ceased to exist about 140,000 years ago. Nobody knows exactly why, but the entire population of the earth dropped to about 10,000 people. And we want to tell a story about a young girl who basically survived this in Africa with the help of other tribes who they used to fight with. They all find out they have different skills that can help them survive, and they make a journey through Africa to the Mediterranean coast, where they finally find peace and are able to continue our human race.
Oh, very impressive. I wish you all the best with all these projects. And I want to ask you about Ukraine, how you see Ukraine in these projects. Are you glad to see Ukraine in co-production with one of these movies?
Yeah, the principle of co-production is the co-producers have to put in money usually from their local funding bodies. So that's the big thing. We would love to have Ukraine in some form involved in each of these projects. It's just a matter of we get the positive decision. Without that, a co-production structure is basically how much money does each party put in. So if somebody doesn't have the money to put in, then it's you can't really do it as a co-production. You can do it as a service job, and we'd still like to work with Ukraine, no matter if we get funding or not, as even as service work if we don't get funding for the co-production. But yeah, Ukraine and Poland, I think, before I became a film producer, I had a cinema company called Silver Screen, and I've basically been to every city in the Ukraine, over 300,000 people. So I love the country, and I was traveling to Ukraine in like 2004, 2005, 2006. Quite a long time ago, 15 years ago. So it's interesting for me to see how the country is developing. The people, I think, are very warm. The people that I've met and the people that I've worked with in Ukraine, and they're extremely talented. So I think, joining forces, Poland and Ukraine, as two of the biggest Slavic countries, I think, really makes sense. I've had a good experience with all of my contacts with Ukraine, and we would hope to continue it in the future as well.
And the next logical question will be about money. I want to to compare budget of animation movie in such techniques such as Loving Vincent and the Peanuts. I want to ask you about budget of other Polish animation movies. What is bigger, your movies or other Poland animation movies?
Yeah, we're definitely, basically we have to make two films in one budget. Because we shoot the film with the actors. It's about €5.5 million. So I think Loving Vincent was 5 million. The Peasants is 5.5, just because it's a longer film as well. Loving Vincent was 100 minutes or 90 minutes, and the Peasants is 110 or 120. We haven't got the final edit done, but somewhere around there. So yeah, so they're not cheap to make. Which is also why this technique can't be used for every film. It has to be something that, you know, has the potential to find a wide audience. You can't do a really niche type of project using this painting animation technique just because, you know, it is so labor intensive. You know, the painters can do, you know, like I think I can't remember who said it, but you know, 2 to 3 frames, 3 to 4 frames a day is kind of like the average. So, you know, it takes a lot of time to do, and you know, you have to pay people to do it, obviously.
And for example, some other Polish movies are cheaper or more expensive.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the animation style, but I mean, you can do probably a feature-length animated film for half that cost, and probably like, you know, big Polish live-action films, not even animated films, are probably, you know, if they don't have a lot of VFX and things like that, or, you know, something that's really makes them more expensive, are probably about half of that in terms of the budget. So, and I mean, some really well-known Polish films probably are a fourth of our budget. So, you know, they're films that we do every couple of years, you know, because they take so long to make. But, you know, the idea is that they're popular enough that you can still, you know, Loving Vincent did very well, and we were able to recoup all the investors, and the film went into profit. So, you know, we were happy about that. But that's the only way you can continue doing this, is if you keep making films that, you know, that basically make back their budget.
Thank you.
Are there any questions among the audience and the viewers who are watching us online? There is an opportunity to ask the question in the comments. If there are no...
for very detailed stories about your projects, and we wish you all the best, and finally to take an Oscar, the Oscar for the Peanuts, and Ukraine as partner finally with support of our country.
Well, hopefully we have a better chance this time around, because we can apply for animation and for best foreign film. So.
Okay, thank you very much. І наступні питання.
Okay, so the next questions will be about this film as well. I would like to ask Olga and the ladies, as it was already mentioned by Sean, in this film, in comparison with Loving Vincent, the Ukrainian crew was working in Ukraine. For them, there have been created rather comfortable job places. The selection of the people was done in Ukraine. I will not take your words, in fact. Whatever you could tell us. Tell me in more details. How was this process ongoing? I mean, the selection process. What was your participants? Yes, sure. Last year, we created a project thanks to the co-funding of the company of BreakThru and the Ukrainian Cultural Fund. That was a very interesting project. We've created the online exhibition on the paintings from Loving Vincent, and also the training for the artists on animation. And within this project we have conducted the selection of the painters and artists for the work on the Peasants. We got more than 300 applications for the selection, out of which we've invited for the tests, well, I think approximately 70 painters and artists this selection and testing was happening for 3 days, and after that 20 painters were selected for the training, and out of those 20 we got rid of several of them, and the ones who remained together with the painters from the previous project will be working on the Peasants. So what was happening at the first stage of the selection? It was the portfolio, and then what happened during the testing process. I think that Katerina and Tatiana will tell about that. Well, you have already told what was the selection in Poland for Loving Vincent, and what was the difference in comparison with the previous one. Well, in fact, the whole system itself is the same. Just when we've conducted the selection for Loving Vincent, the main thing was to copy or to feel the style of Van Gogh. But here you need to feel the academic style of painting, and it is so important. That is why, of course, we invited first and foremost the painters who have a nice background, kind of craft. So how it happened? The people were invited to the specially equipped studio where each of them had their own station, a kind of the PALPS, Place Animation Workstation. This is an acronym, so it meant that you have your own kind of booth with the equipment. For instance, the beamer, which shows with the tablet, which shows the image which you as an animator need to paint. You have a computer where you have your own frame to paint, and the previous one and the next frames. So you need, first and foremost, you should create it in the style of the first one, and then to make it live, to animate it. And it is so important to see whether the animator can move to reflect the movement of the actor in more details, and whether he or she can preserve the number of strokes, because when the animation is moving and it is played, if you change the number of strokes too much or the size of the stroke, this animation will be beaming a lot, and it is not that easy to perceive this animation. I should clarify instantly the difference between the first and the second frame. What was the difference? Do you still have the same at this oil painting from frame to frame, or you fully paint the new picture from scratch? Or do you have an opportunity to erase some of the elements and to paint them again, or you need to repaint the whole process? A good animator will always find an opportunity to remain, to leave something on the canvas, because everything should be very rapid. But everything depends on the speed of the elements which are in the frame. There are some of the frames which you can fully erase, 100%, nothing is left. And you need to move. Well, everything depends on how you reproduce the speed of the elements. For instance, there is the frame with rain. There is the speed of rain, the speed of an actor, the speed of mimics, there is the speed of some other elements. So you need to move each of the elements with its own speed. And this is the professionalism. Sometimes you move for half a millimeter, but stroke by stroke. This is the worst case scenario, because you can't do more or less. Yes, at the same painting, but you take each stroke and repaint it. You move it for half a millimeter. Sometimes you need to erase it for 1 or 3 centimeters, but sometimes you need to erase it fully. The movement of the camera can be both complicated, but it's easier because you erase everything and you painted everything from scratch. The complication, the sophistication of the process is still that for the 10 seconds you have to create them for 3 months. The color and the tone of the color should stay the same during the 3 months. And in this movie, it will be shown only for 10 seconds, and no one will understand if the tone changes, it becomes darker or more red or green. So there are lots of things which you need to keep in the same quality, the tone, the color, the rhythm, the speed. And one more technical clarification for the better understanding. What's the basics? For the foundation is the canvas, the wood. Well, first the Loving Vincent was done on the cardboard, but then later, when we began to animate it, it was quickly drying out. When the paint is dried out, you have the remnants of the texture, which is not needed for the animation. So we just went to the kind of the boards, thin boards, and we also used the special oil paint which slowed down the drying out of the paint to make it easier and to erase the painted. So when you totally change the frame, you take the dust and you fully dust the paint, or you just put it for the future exhibitions to the side. No, we throw it away. Well, but not with the dust. We have the special tools to erase it very accurately, and then you dry it out. So how long this board is working? We were given some of the bits, not more than 1 minute, because the minute includes 720 frames, and 720 frames, if the animator is quick, is done during 6 to 10 months. So one board for 1 minute, yes. But we were given smaller bits for 30 seconds. Even less, yes, 10 seconds, 5, 15 seconds, 20 seconds. The biggest was 30 seconds. Would you again clarify what was the size of this painting? Approximately, well, I don't know the exact size in millimeters, but approximately 50 per 70. Yes, the board is bigger, but the format where you paint is smaller, a bit smaller, but approximately like this. And would you remind how many frames or paintings you have per day? Well, depending on the sophistication. Sean said properly, some of them had 12 levels, or in Loving Vincent, the 12th level was for about 1.5 frame, if you are very quick. What do you mean by levels? Yes, the level of sophistication, the complexity. When you have the smaller one, where the grass is moving, when one portrait is moving, then it's moving with the hands, I mean the actor, then 2 portraits. But the complexity does not, as it was explained above, it's sometimes easier to paint from scratch, right? Yes. Still, you calculate what is easier and you understand in average that this is the level 9 or level 10 of complexity. It's approximately, if it's level 10, that it's 12 frames per day. If it's level 7, then it's 5 frames per day. But not everybody could do that. Just imagine that in 2 hours you need to create the picture 50 per 70 centimeters, the portrait, the figure. So if you don't have the foundation, the craft background, you can do it with a pencil. Yes, it's not real. So just to achieve such a speed, Tatiana is very quick, so it will have 3 months? No, it's not true. For about 1.5, 2 months. I was not that quick. 1.5, 2 months to have the proper usual number of the frames in the complexity. This is the time for training. No. We were able to paint 1 frame in 2 hours only when we worked. Tanya worked for 1.5 years, and I was working for 3 months to achieve the standard speed. Yes, the experience gained, and then the speed, well, sped up, and we finalized as one of the quickest animators ever. Coming back to the competition, you say that we've checked also the speed, the basic speed you had to in the beginning. But what happened then? What else was checked? The speed, how the animator can paint the first frame and to animate the following frames. Then how he or she can provide the change of the speed of movement of the elements, whether he or she can preserve the painting anatomicality and the similarity between the elements. The third is to preserve the color and the tone. The fourth, the texture. Because in Van Gogh, in Loving Vincent, the texture is so important. As for the Peasants, it's not that full of textures. If you begin to work, the amount of paint can increase and more, and at one stage you need to erase everything, to reduce all of that. Whether you follow all of those elements in the work and the precision, the speed of this painting, there are lots of different. And how long was the stage for the contestants? 3 days. And then? Who assessed all of that? Was it sent in videos or pictures to Poland? How did it happen? Yeah, sure, we sent it. The performed art, the seconds of animation per each artist was sent to Poland. They've got the head of an animation department, Piotr Darmiak. He was the one who invented this painting animation working station, this pose, and he assessed whether all of those factors were well done by the person. Whether this person can in fact keep to those technical details, because sometimes it happens that the person sticks to all of the technical details but makes only a frame per day. It's too slow for the studio. There are people who are working very quickly, but they don't stick to those details, and it's also not enough. So we need to find the person sometimes slowed down to get better quality or to speed up. So those details are very complicated as a process. Piotr and Svetlana, who conducted this training in Ukraine, they had certain consultations, they had arguments, sometimes agreed and approved the process. Well, Piotr is one of the most important animators in Loving Vincent, and it's not that easy to work with him. He's very scrupulous and very precise. I was working in pair with him. I know how he's working. I finalized some of his frames, animation frames, and he's a professional. He's a huge expert. If you take all of this data, it's easier to work with him. It's much easier. But you can be a nice painter, but you need to know how to paint academically. But the speed is one of the most important elements. You need to do that very quickly. Okay, and after you sent it, the tasks, yes. What happened then? Then Piotr with Svetlana were arguing who suits the process, who doesn't, and then they selected the 20, and they conducted the training for the 20 for 2 weeks. Out of those 20, the final selection included the high offer. Well, I don't remember how many people exactly. Well, not all of them, not everything, not everybody. Some of them understood that it's not their thing to do. Yes, there were people like that, but during the testing process, among those who finalized the training, there were no people who refused to work on so far. Got it? And now I will move more to the style, the technology of this kind of painting. As it was mentioned multiple times today, in both movies, the shooting of the film were taking place by 2 bigger independent blocks. First, they shot the living part. The real actors were playing the full script as in a usual full-length feature film, and then each of the frames was used as a prompt. Well, the film was shot, for instance, let's take Loving Vincent. It was shot with a green background. The actors were real only in the interaction with actors. Then the whole footage was given to the post-production, where designers installed the paintings of Vincent for the background. In the computer, yes, they added it, so it helped the animator when he developed the scene and the episode in the material, it was easier to work. There were some moments when the animators didn't get the background, then they had to invent it. So they had just a head, some object he had to interact with, some clothes, attire, and then the background had to be invented. That was your task, to develop it for your consideration, yeah. But those elements were not that numerous, mostly as the idea of the film was the paintings of Van Gogh's who were becoming live and telling the narrative. They were given the parts, the fragments of his paintings, because Van Gogh, more than 100 of paintings of Van Gogh were included into the movie. So they gave this background, and the animator, which is working with the keyframe, he or she has developed how many strokes should be there, how it can be combined stylistically, which palette should be there, how it can all be adapted for the task of the animator. Because there were such cases, for instance, in our experience, that when we created the keyframe, but the animation of this keyframe was only done by us because it was too sophisticated. It was okay for us, but for the animators it was a bit too much. Yes, they didn't know what to do with it, so we sat down and we made everything simplified, because we need to understand that after you there should be the whole crew, the whole team of animators to animate all of that.
And again, I would be more in detail. So you have a working desk. There is, yes, a board on it, okay. And there is a projection of this frame from the feature film. It is on pause, and then you put the paint and on each element of the film. Does it work like that? Yes. You see, this whole film is a set of photos. So the animated film is a set of paintings. So actually, it is projected on that table, but it doesn't actually lie next to you. Yes, why do we do that? Why do we project it? Because this is the help to the animators. Okay, an example. So you have to make 700 shots of a portrait, so that this portrait doesn't run, so it's bigger or smaller, because every millimeter is important. That the projector helped the animator to keep this similarity to the actor, to look at the nuances of the mimic. Because when the painter works, he or she looks the most expressive angle in the model. He walks around the model, studies the model, and then chooses that one angle, the one that's the most striking. The animator draws everything, which is the striking and the not striking. Right? So you look, it's like, what kind of face is that? What is he doing? And only after you animate several frames, you see that it just simply says hello. Not even hello, but something like, okay, 6 months have passed, and just, yeah. Because when you talk, even when you open a mouth like that, how many movements you do? And all this has to be drawn millimeter by millimeter and centimeter by centimeter. Of course, this is actually, you can lose that. So that's why we did the projection, so that each detail, each movement we could animate. And that was a contour drawing. Along with that, there was a frame on the computer which was in color. The shot of this projection, and next to it, the third window is how you have drawn the previous shot. That's already on the computer. Yes, all these 3 shots are there on the computer. The projection only goes on your board, and on the computer you see 3 frames. And yes, and the following one, yes, that's just, yeah. Yes, that's the feature already. So then you compare the color, not on the board, but on the computer. Previous shot and your shot. And you kept taking picture of it and compare what you have. The previous and the current. Oh, this is on computer. Here you might have blue, and there you might have blue and green. And here it's like, okay. You do it, it's like whether you manage to and how often did you have feedback from your supervisor? How often did they check the work? They actually went to to us very often, so I really appreciate the time when they don't visit you. When they don't visit you, you do the work correctly, in a good way, in a correct way, and you simply work. But when they go to, that means there's going to be corrections. And then the discussion starts. And they also see it over there. We actually, in the end of the day, we gave their piece, and together with Dorota, they actually checked. And the supervisor is actually your helper. It helps you understand the task from Dorota. If you don't understand something, so if you need to, well, something doesn't work, let's say, you need help, then the supervisor will help you. If you have to arrange the feedback with the animator, that's the supervisor, the helper. Actually, they are very important in this process. Okay, the last question, then how often do you have mistakes in your work? How big was the volume that you had to rework? I had very few mistakes, but when I did, they were big. So, I mean, I drew portraits well. I had problems with the rain. I had 11 shots, which they said, I mean, they do not work with the speed. And that's almost a week of work, yes. And, but still supervisors helped. That's why I like them a lot. They talked to the designers. And they changed. They traded places of the shots. I didn't redo anything, they simply changed the speed, but they said that the shots didn't work. It was only with the rain and also with the keyframe, which people were unable to animate. But as far as I understand and remember, Hugh simply took it for his collection. It's like it was a beautiful shot. But yes, there were cases when they said it wasn't. Because you get tired. On 300th frame, you don't understand whether it's good or not. And you understand that you are making something not good, because if you paint the same face 4 times in a row, my actor Armand, I can actually paint him with my eyes closed. I worked with him all these 10 months. And the element is in that. And that is why the animators were given short pieces so that you don't get bored. Yes, so you don't get tired. Okay, Ola? Yeah, I just wanted to say that this friendship and this relationship with the supervisor, we actually put it now on Peasants. And Katya and Tanya are going to be those friends on the following project. Yes, I hope that we'll manage. Yes. Actually, Piotr left. We had a studio in another country, in Greece, and he left. And during this time, we made the biggest number of frames. But I think 1 or 2 shots, he still said they weren't good. I simply redid it. But still he was happy that finally at least 1 frame he actually said wasn't good. And probably understands it even now. But still there were periods when you went and you made the frame to another animator because he couldn't do anything anymore. I had a case like that twice, yes. I started work with the animator, and 2 or 3 shots I restored the drawing. It was a portrait, and that person was able to animate it in a normal way and did everything that it was supposed to do. And the second time, that person was already very tired, and I simply finished it. And I restored the animation, restored the drawing, because very often you lose the character, you lose the nature of an actor. And I finished it again. So, I mean, animators, they helped each other, because you are tired, you could work even more than 9 hours, and those who worked the 3rd year in a row, they were already exhausted. So that is why in such moments you have to check your work all the time. There were moments when my supervisor, Marhevka, she simply stood next to me. I had to finish a piece for the festival in France, and She simply spent 32 hours with me until I was done without any breaks. Was it easier or was it stressful? Her or myself? Actually, I have a record. 32 hours, no breaks, maybe 5 minutes max. I worked on the animation and no sleep, but it's great that when the supervisor supports you, even in this way. She could have gone to sleep or something, but she supported me all the time. We made everything on time, and it was great. And now now you're going to have the promotion. Yes, I hope that it won't reach to those moments and we'll be able to plan our load better. When do you plan to do this Ukrainian block of the filming work? Has it already been decided in which period? Yeah, it hasn't yet been decided since which date, but in the nearest future. As soon as we decide everything, we solve all technical issues as well as financing, it's going to be as soon as possible. What about, are there any more chances in artists to get involved into the team, and is it going to be a repeat selection before the financing started? Well, probably there's not going to be a repeated wide selection, but if we have a situation like that, that not all 15 ones in Ukraine are going to be, if all of them are going to be busy, then it's possible that several artists will select more if somebody refuses, or if somebody gets pregnant or something. Because this happened. Svetlana Havrushak, who did the training, I mean, between the training and now, she's going to have a child soon. I mean, that's great. I also believe so. Okay, are there any questions in the audience to our guests? It's a very interesting topic. I already see that time has passed by very quickly. Yes, please. Hello, my name is Mikita. I wanted to ask, if I'm not mistaken, it was mentioned that the peasants are going to be done on a computer, right? Yes, it's going to be like that. Actually, the whole team is the whole team ready to go to computers, from painting to computers? Is it a question for us? Yeah, we work with canvas and oils and also with computer because, I mean, we graduated from the photography department, you know, and so that's why we have this graphic software. Still, I think that it's practicing gamers, let's say. But still, we take the base. But I mean, improving the base that you have, then it's better than to work like that. If you actually can draw, if you can paint, if you know the anatomy, then the instrument is not important anymore. I mean, that's not as principled. You can work in programs that are digitized. There are tablets, you have a pen, you have some set, the brushes, and you can paint. It's like a canvas or something. So actually, there are artists for whom it is huge stress. I mean, there are people who are adventurous, so give them actually this interesting task and you do it. The hardest is to get academic education, that's for sure, because you need 4 or 6 years for that. But passing from oil to tablet is very small intervals if possible. And actually, if you from scratch, it's much longer. So I just wanted to see how much has your attitude towards your future professional career changed in this. So do you see yourself more in the animation or in classical painting? I mean, not just classical, static painting, let's say. Well, you know, with Love Vincent, this is a project which expanded our perception. So, and when you work in a team which has more than 11 country representatives, you are interested in you see how art develops in their countries, and this experience, the experience of animation and drawing in big amounts, you actually transpose it onto your own creative work. As for our creative work, for now, I mean, we tried lots of things as of today. That's we have a reward for our mosaics from the church. We also have awards for the book illustrations. Last year we got awards. It was Silver Key for the series of graphic works for the Museum of Contemporary Art in Cyprus. We participated and graded as one of the best animators with Love Vincent Studio. So still for us was the most interesting is how the project is interesting, and for ourselves just to have a rest when you implement one project after another. We do painting and graphics in parallel. So we came back from Graphic International Symposium 2 days ago. We represented Ukraine as graphic artists, so it's kind of crazy life, you know. And you actually went into my last question of today. How do you rest? How do you reload after 32 hours of painting? What gives you an opportunity to reload? Yes. Well, how did the artists rest? They actually painted. We opened 2 exhibitions in Poland. That was 3 artists. One of another Ukraine. Also, there was international exhibition. Also painting. So I mean, in 10 months, we didn't just create 15 minutes of the film, our team from Ukraine, but also we opened 2 exhibitions. So that is why for us, as for artists, we need self-expression. That is why we can rest when we can do what we can, what we want. And I mean, film in some boundaries, because you are restricted by the style, the speed. When you're doing something for yourself, you don't have any boundaries. But this work on the film gives us to work on allow us to talk very quickly. You are not afraid to change something, to erase something, to paint something new. So I like this experience. It is a great match to our creative practice. Yes, and Van Gogh actually taught us that work in a studio, it doesn't mean it's just obligation. You study the works of Van Gogh, his colors. This enriches your palette as an artist. All this is actually, it's creative freedom in Van Gogh style, of course, but it depends on you how you interpret it all, how you actually adapt it for animation. There were tasks, for example, when from black and white frames you to move merges into color. I mean, this is exclusive creative practice because there were no prepared frames. This is only the work of the animator. And for the artists who work on the film, there are some huge creative tasks to be done. And for us, we rest when we paint. We also like cooking because we like eating. And travels, yes. Because in 11 years, we visited 19 countries. We lived in 2 of them, yes, for 2 years, even more than 2 years. But this whole process, when you travel, when you look around, your outlook broadens, and this helps your creative work. and you're understanding what you can do and what you want in the end. So that is why for us, rest is food. Yes, food, not just travels. Because artists like eating, especially Ukrainians. And they cook very well. And in studio, they laughed at us all the time because when we actually had lunch, the whole Ukrainian team, it was very beautiful because there were some weird salads. We cooked things together. We made some barbecues. So it was obvious that Ukrainians like to eat. Okay, cool. And finally, we see that you are really live people, real people, and not some kind of geniuses. That we're happy to live in the same era. You're really impressed with your stories. I'm a fan of this film, Loving Vincent, and I'm happy that today we managed to open up this behind the scenes and to see the huge work, the incredible, the fantastic, and diligent and arduous work on this film. I hope that this project, the Peasants, works out and becomes successful for Ukraine. I wish you lots of energy to bring it to the very end, and I thank everyone for being with us today. I hope that you also liked it the way that I did, and you spent your time with German. Thank you for the invitation.